When the walls whisper a story. There's a certain kind of quiet that settles over an old house. It isn't just a lack of noise, it's a heavy silence, thick with the lives of everyone who lived there before you. Most of us just learn to tune it out. We write off the creaks as settling floors and the groans as wind hitting the roof. But some houses don't let you ignore them. Some houses have stories they need to tell. This is the story of the Miller family, David, Sarah, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emily. They thought they'd found their forever home, a beautiful but eerie Victorian that had been on the market for months with no takers. What they didn't realize was that its secrets were part of the sale. The whispers supposedly started on their third night. They told themselves it was just the wind rattling the old window frames. But the wind doesn't usually know your name. Section 1. The Dream. For David and Sarah, the house on Elm Street was everything they'd ever dreamed of. It was a grand 3-story relic with a huge porch and beautiful decorative trim, the kind of place you see in paintings. As city people, they were sick of small apartments and the endless noise. This house was meant to be their peace, a place where Emily could have a real backyard and where their family could finally put down roots. The first few weeks felt like a fairy tale. They painted, polished floors, and just watched how the afternoon sun poured through the tall, wavy glass windows. They laughed about the house's quirks, the one door that wouldn't stay shut, the way the pipes shuddered when you ran the hot water. This was the character they wanted, the charm of an old home. David would sometimes find Emily in a random room, humming. When he'd ask who she was talking to, she'd just smile and say, "The house." It seemed like a sweet, harmless game. The faint murmurs and creaks they heard were easy to dismiss. They'd joke that it was just the ghosts of old servants, still doing their chores. The house was just settling, breathing, living its life right alongside them. At least, that's what they told themselves. Section 2. The Unsettling. The change was slow, so slow you could barely notice it at first. It started with the cold spots, random pockets of chill that would pop up and vanish in seconds, leaving goosebumps behind. Then, the noises got stranger. They weren't the normal groans of an old house anymore. This was different. It sounded like footsteps in the upstairs hallway when they were all downstairs, a soft, dragging sound. And then came the whispers. Sarah heard them first. A dry, rustling sound, like dead leaves being pushed across the attic floor. It was so faint, right on the edge of her hearing, that she tried to convince herself it was nothing. But it kept happening. Sometimes it sounded like a name, a single syllable sighed into the dead of night. David was a rational man. He blamed the old wiring, the wind, anything with a logical explanation. But logic couldn't explain why the rocking chair in Emily's room would sometimes be moving on its own when they went to tuck her in. Emily, though, was never scared. She started having what sounded like full-on conversations with someone they couldn't see. "Eliza is sad," she told her mom one afternoon, pointing to an empty corner of her bedroom. "She misses her mother." Hearing a specific name, Eliza, sent a chill down Sarah's spine. A lot of kids have imaginary friends, but this felt different. There was a deep sadness in Emily's voice that wasn't hers. Soon, that feeling of being watched became a constant weight in the house, settling into the empty hallways and dark corners. Section 3. The Discovery. The breaking point came on a cold Tuesday in October. Sarah was in the kitchen and heard Emily laughing in the living room. When Sarah walked in, her daughter was totally alone, holding up a drawing. "Eliza likes it," Emily said, her gaze fixed on the empty air next to her. "She says it looks just like the locket her papa gave her." Sarah felt the blood rush from her face. A locket. How could Emily possibly know about that? Just a week before, while trying to fix a loose floorboard in their bedroom, David had found a small, tarnished silver locket hidden deep inside the wall. It was empty, but had delicate engravings. They hadn't told Emily about it. The very next day, Sarah went to the county records office. With trembling hands, she looked through old, dusty property records. She found them. the original owners from 1895, the Davenport family. And there, listed with them, was their 9-year-old daughter, Eliza Davenport. The rest of the story came from old newspaper articles on microfilm. The Davenports were a happy family until a brutal winter hit. Eliza got sick with tuberculosis. Trapped in her room, she slowly wasted away. The articles described the family's terrible grief and how after Eliza died, they sealed her bedroom shut, completely unable to face the memory of her suffering. They sold the house a year later and left town, leaving behind a tragedy that never really got resolved. That sealed room was now Emily's bedroom. The house wasn't haunted by something evil. It was holding on to a memory, a deep, century-old sadness. Section 4. The Revelation. That night, knowing the truth, everything suddenly made sense. The whispers weren't threats, they were pleas. The cold spots weren't a ghostly presence, but the lingering chill of a fever that never went away. The footsteps weren't an intruder, but a lonely little girl still wandering the halls of her home. As the family sat together in the living room, a storm raging outside, the house seemed to go completely still. The wind stopped, and a heavy silence fell. And in that silence, a voice, clearer than it had ever been, spoke from the top of the stairs. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was the small, clear voice of a child. "I'm so cold." The words just hung there in the air, filled with 100 years of loneliness. It didn't sound angry, it was just heartbreaking. David and Sarah looked at each other, all their skepticism gone, replaced by a painful reality they couldn't deny. Emily, who heard it too, just looked toward the stairs and said, "I know, but you're not alone anymore." This was the moment the house finally made its story understood. It wasn't trying to scare them away. It was just trying to be heard. Some in the paranormal field have a concept for this, called the stone tape theory, the idea that strong emotional events can get imprinted onto inanimate objects, like the very walls of a house. Section 5. The Aftermath. After that night, something shifted. The fear that had soaked into the house was gone, replaced by a feeling of empathy. The Millers weren't living in a haunted house anymore. They were sharing their home with a memory that just needed peace. They didn't call a priest or a team of ghost hunters. They did something much simpler. The next day, David built a fire in the fireplace in Emily's room, a fireplace that had been cold for a century. Sarah went out and bought the thickest, warmest wool blanket she could find and draped it over the antique rocking chair. They started talking to Eliza, not like she was a ghost, but just as a part of the house's history. They'd let her know she wasn't alone, that she was safe. Slowly, the strange things started to fade away. The cold spots vanished. The footsteps stopped. The feeling of being watched was replaced by a sense of calm. They had listened to the house's secret, and by doing so, they had helped set it free. The walls on Elm Street are quiet now. The Miller family still lives there, and their love for the house is even deeper now that they know its story. They didn't run from the whispers. They chose to listen. In doing that, they brought peace to a lost soul and found a truer meaning of what it is to make a house a home. It's a powerful reminder that the places we live in have their own histories, and sometimes, if we are just still enough to listen, we can hear a story that's been waiting to be told. What would you do? Could you live in a house with a history like that? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have your own story of whispering walls or things you can't explain, I'd love to hear it. For more stories that walk the line between our world and the next, be sure to subscribe.